I'm at our offices in Frankfurt today for our 5th annual OTC Derivatives Conference. Patrick, we're about to launch into the 5th OTC Derivatives Seminar. The room's going to be filled up with people a little bit later on. We've got quite a focus on ISDA documentation. So ISDA's also launched a couple of projects where they've created a French ISDA master agreement, an Irish ISDA master agreement, supporting documents. But there is an alternative in Germany to ISDA. It's not new just because of Brexit. It's something that's been going on for a long time. Tell me about the German law alternatives.
Yes, the German master agreement is now out there for more than 20 years. It has been used for many derivatives transactions in the past. And also the working group on financial derivatives transactions does an amazing job on keeping the documentation up to date, and we are privileged to help them on certain of these tasks that have to be done in context of EMIR implementation. What is important to say is that the German master agreement becomes more international. All documentations will now be prepared not only in German but also in the English language and can be used and read not only by German native speakers. And what I said before, it's a really current and accurate documentation that stays on the top of the developments. Just yesterday, the addendum to the EMIR refit requirements has been published. So it implements the new requirements under EMIR refit just a few days after EMIR refit came into force. And also the German documentation was one of the first one that provided for a clearing master agreement covering not only OTC derivatives but also exchange-traded derivatives clearing.
Well, that's so interesting that you say about the English element to it. When I've seen the German master before, you have one column in German, one column in English. The German version applies. Is that still the case, or is it full English language versions as well?
So the binding language is usually the German language version, but we also have seen transactions where at least confirmations have been prepared under the English language, and has then been agreed by the parties to be the binding language. And as the documentation becomes more and more available in bilingual form, you could theoretically also use the English language version as a binding version, but we would always advise to use the German language version because it is finally the ones that a court has to look into.
Well, that's interesting with the court point, because something that always surprises me in Frankfurt is just how well everybody speaks English across the board, not just in the office but everywhere you go. How do the courts feel about having an English language version?
The court feels very, very easy about this because the English language text still have to be translated into German. So, but the translation comes with the documentation, so it makes it more easy to discuss legal questions about the documentation.
Well, one of the other things, I know you've told me about this before, is the idea of building bridges across to the ISDA documentation. It's one thing to have the master agreement, it's one thing to have these addendums for EMIR refit and be doing those quickly, but counterparties are probably wanting to go trade commodity defs, interest rate defs, under the credit derivatives definitions. And how do they do that? How does these bridges work across to ISDA definitional booklets?
I mean, first of all, bridges can easily work if you just bridge into defined terms. What is an exchange? What is a business day? I mean, this is a definition. There's not so much. It's not so much of about a regulating provision. The problem comes more into play once there is a cross-reference into an early termination amount in an ISDA documentation that is not known under the German documentation. Then, in order to correctly bridge into ISDA documentation, then you need to fine-tune the bridges, so to say, and then make some interpretation changes as to how understand certain references in the ISDA definitions under the German master agreement frame.
So the parties can trade, they can bridge across to ISDA documents. One of the things both of us have been very focused on is phase 5 initial margin. What's been happening in terms of creating parallel documentation that will work for initial margin under the German law platform?
So the German IM document has been published last September for phase 3 counterparties. The structure of the IM addendum is a bit different than we would normally do it, because we take into account that security interest over the collateral that will be provided might be created under another law than German law. So it is modular in the sense that we create the obligation to transfer collateral and to return collateral, but the actual pledge will then be done under the laws of the location of the account. Meaning, if the account is in Luxembourg, you create the security interest by way of a Luxembourg pledge agreement, or if the account is in everywhere else, like in the UK, you create an English language.
So the same as with ISDA,
Yeah.
really, the CSD or CTA under English law,
Yeah.
then local law security wherever the custodian may be.
Yeah, it is a form of a CTA, yeah, but it's just the CTA. So there are not several documentations necessary for each law of where an account can be located or where a custodian can be located. So it just annexes the master agreement and creates for the obligations to deliver collateral and return collateral.
Are the custodians on board with this? Because I know that's one of the reasons we have all these myriad of versions of the CSD and CTA. Are the custodians saying we're happy to have a German law sitting above as the bilateral agreement?
Yeah, the approach is very flexible. We have opening clauses in the documentation that enables the parties to flip in additional custodian-related provisions if necessary, but it takes into the account that there is this custodian documentation that to a certain extent has rules that parties also have to apply to. So we think it works well. It has to be checked on a case-by-case basis with respect to the relevant custodian whether further changes are made, but with the frequent custodians that are used in the Eurozone, they have been comfortable so far with regard to the core setup.
So, Patrick, the platform's there. My next question is going to be, who's using it? Because I can see this working. Let's say it's a German bank and it's facing another German bank, a Landesbank. Why use English law? Both parties are German. Makes absolute sense to use German documentation. But as I've been looking across the skyline, I can see there's a lot of building going on. Brexit's happening. People are moving across to Frankfurt. In fact, I recall last year you pointed out a very nice area over the hill there where I could move the family should I need to move across. But is it going beyond just German financial institutions facing each other with these documents, or are you seeing German institutions facing non-German institutions, or indeed a Spanish institution facing a French institution and contemplating using the German platform?
Yeah. So initially the documentation was set up for a bank-customer relationship, so bank and corporate trading relationship. But during the life of the master agreement platform, it has been used also between banks and also between German banks and international banks. Yeah? So given that we have a new netting law in force since 2 years, the documentation become also more modern, more flexible in terms what are international standards when it comes to closeout netting, or what about regarding the delivery of collaterals and return of collaterals. This is why the German law documentation is a Eurozone, a Europe documentation. Yeah, we have all the benefits of the provisions in the European Union about enforcing judgments in jurisdictions other than in Germany. So these benefits remain, and are not currently subject to that uncertainty that we still have under the Brexit discussions at the moment. So it is a tested document as of these days. We have seen trading between German and international banks under the German master agreement, and see it as a valid other option.
So we've been doing these seminars for 5 years now. This is our fifth one. And in 2016, we had the seminar. It was 2 days after the Brexit vote, and I had to do an impromptu presentation in front of a German audience about what this would all mean. And here we are, 3 years down the line, and it's very impressive how the German documentation has come together across that 3-year period and that focus. So I think it's quite clear you've got the foundation, you've got the platform there, and now we've got to look and see what's the take-up going to be over the next year or two. And it would be very interesting when we're back here in a year's time at the 6th conference to reflect on that.
Yes, it will be very interesting to see once Brexit has finally occurred. Yeah, we are currently in a situation where trading relationships are replicated with EU entities of former UK entities, yeah, or existing UK counterparties of German banks, for example. Yeah. In the context of this replication, there are discussions going on which is the basis, or what is the basis under which the trading shall focus in the future: German law, English law, New York law, French law, Irish law, whatever. We are still in that discussion, and we still think that using one of the ISDA shouldn't create a lot of risks, but given the uncertainties, we still see a lot of pressure by some certain counterparties to flip into the German language or German law documentation for the time being.
Well, it's interesting. When we were planning for this conference, you put as a title line for one of our pieces, and this was only back in April, Brexit, the Aftermath. Yeah. Well, let's see. Do you think next year, 6th annual conference, will be in the aftermath? Well, we shall see. We don't know.
We don't know. It looks like, but we don't know how the aftermath will look like. So we still have to prepare. We still have to see legal risks and investigate in legal risk for our clients, both on the side of our colleagues and clients in England and the UK, and on our clients here in the Eurozone or in Germany. We concentrate a lot of these changes, but it is difficult to prepare with 100% certainty on how the Brexit finally will look like.
Patrick, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed.